to another episode of Hunkered Vegans. It's been 743 days that we've been holed up together, and since Charles is holding the camera, you find out that both of us are still alive today. This is actually day 9. So, one of the things I wanted to do with this, these are not necessarily recipes that we're hoping to serve in the restaurant, but these are recipes that are simple, food that can be kept in the fridge, freezes easily, but I'm just trying to show you some easy ways to cook vegan, to have some healthy food on hand. It doesn't have to be difficult. We do some little tricks and little switch outs to avoid the animal products. And today, we're going to work on 16 bean soup. So you can find 16 bean soup mix in the supermarket. These are dried beans. I've done a quick soak, which means I have put the dried beans in a pot, covered them with water, brought it to a boil for a couple of minutes, and then let it sit for an hour. We're going to drain and rinse those beans, and then we're going to add them to our stock pot. Really simple recipe, not a lot to do. I've got a couple of chopped onions. I've got about 4 chopped carrots. We're going to put our aromatics in now. Everything but the salt. When you're cooking with dried beans, wait until the beans are tender before you introduce any salt into your dish. So we've got about a tablespoon of Italian seasoning, about a teaspoon of celery seed. I'm still out of celery, but I'm not going to let that stop me. We're just going to keep cooking. A couple of bay leaves, a little bit of crushed red pepper, maybe a 1/4 teaspoon, and that's that. A good healthy tablespoon of chopped garlic, and we're going to use a can of crushed tomatoes and a small can of tomato paste, just to kind of amp up the flavor for us. I'm probably not going to use a lot of stock base in this, because using dried beans and cooking with the aromatics really does produce a flavorful broth. So let's go to the stove. So one of the things I've talked about is that we plan a menu that is going to be at least partially whole food, plant-based cooking. So what does that mean? It means that all of the ingredients are whole food and plant-based, and we don't use any concentrated fats, so we don't use oils. So I'm going to show you how to saute without oil. In this case, we're going to use some beer. A little bit of lager. I'm going to let that go. Get hot in there. Our pan was already hot. Now, if you're really trying to get a brown on these, that's possible. I'm not so much as trying to soften and sweat the onions, concentrate the flavor a little bit, so that'll be fine. Now, I mentioned I don't add any salt when I'm cooking with dried beans, not until the end. So while I would normally add some salt to the onions to sweat them, I'm not going to do that this time. Now toss the carrots in with the onions. Let those go. If we need to, we'll throw in another tablespoon or so of beer. You can use beer, you can use wine, you can use vegetable stock, and you can use water. Just something to get it going. Keep it moving until your vegetables release some of their natural juice. And again, if you need a little more, just throw a little more in there. Got a nice translucence going now with our onion. It's released a lot of its juice. Concentrating down. And we're going to start building our flavors. We'll throw in our seasonings. Again, all the herbs and flavors, no salt. Oh, it smells great. And the only thing in this recipe that wouldn't be whole food and plant-based would be the olive oil. So that's why I just omitted it. We're not going to miss it. We don't need it for anything. This is going to be very healthy, loaded with fiber, and some good healthy stuff is what we need right now. It's our tomato paste. I'm going to do a very nanny thing. I'm going to throw some water in that and swirl it around just so we get all of the tomato paste into our recipe. Tomato paste will also deglaze a pan if you need that, if anything has been sticking. That's why I often start with that, because that'll clean up the bottom of your pan really nice. And start building those flavors. As I said, Nanny never wasted anything, anywhere, anytime. My grandmother would cut the mold off cheese. She's even been known to trim a slice of bread and say, but the rest is fine. Can of fresh tomatoes. Again, just a nice little rinse. I'm using about 10 cups of water because I am making a large pot of soup. Most of the time for a pound of beans, you'll see about 6 cups. I'm going to use more than that. And we may even need to add some liquid. This is our basic stock. This, we've got the drained and rinsed beans. Our 16 bean combination. You can find it in 13 beans, you can find it in 15 beans. Bob's Red Mill makes some, I believe. This is Goya. And we're going to get that up to a boil, and then we're going to let it simmer. And we'll check it after about an hour and a half. The soup will do the work. You know, I am cooking on the fly right now. I'm going to start with just about a teaspoon of liquid smoke. I don't want to add any more. But this is going to replace any ham flavor or any meat flavor. Sometimes you use a little bacon when you start your saute. That's often in bean soup, and then we can adjust that by tasting. The other thing I will probably add a little bit later is some liquid aminos, but I don't want to introduce anything that has any salt at this point. We want to let those beans cook nice and slow. This has been cooking for about 90 minutes, and you'll see it's really thick. Our beans are softening, everything is marrying. And this is about where we want our finished product, but since we're not done and we've got a good half an hour more of cooking, I'm going to add about 8 more cups of water. Just going to put it in there. This has got some really intense flavor going already. We are going to season this up at the end. Check our seasonings, check our flavor, and make sure we're cool. I've got a couple more ingredients to add. I love what potatoes add to a soup, and I love potatoes in a good bean and tomato-based soup. So this is what I happen to have on hand. We've got 7 small russet potatoes that I've already scrubbed and dried, and now we're going to chop them. We're going to stir a potato in. and let that cook with the beans and the broth for the last 30 minutes, and then we will adjust our seasonings. So one of the most important things you can do when you're kind of cooking by the seat of your pants is taste your food. So we're going to finish this soup now. Our potatoes are tender. We've got a nice thick cooked down broth, and don't forget we have added no salt to this point. So it's time for that. So I tasted it, and here's how I think we need to adjust the seasonings and the flavor of this soup. We're gonna add about 2 tablespoons of Bragg's liquid aminos. It's a great substitute for soy sauce, less sodium, a lot of flavor, adds a nice meaty flavor. I'm gonna add another half a teaspoon of liquid smoke because I'm not quite getting the smoky flavor that I want from this soup. So that's gonna go in. It's time to salt it up. I'm also gonna use about a teaspoon of cumin, teaspoon of celery salt, because again, we didn't have celery, so we're building our flavors, and about a teaspoon and a half of kosher salt. We're gonna add a little bit of black pepper to this, but we've got a nice back heat going with the crushed red pepper we started this with. And the other thing we're gonna do is finish this with some apple cider vinegar. I'm gonna start with a tablespoon, and we're gonna taste it. We're gonna see if we wanna go any further than that. We're getting close. I decided we're gonna do 1 more tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, a little more acid to finish it. And because I have fresh parsley, I'm gonna add some for color, and you know, parsley adds a little bit of sweetness. And as I mentioned before, one of the greatest tools in your kitchen is gonna be a nice clean pair of kitchen shears. It really reduces the time, gives you a nice fine cut. And there we go. Finished with a nice fresh herb. Bit of acid from the vinegar, the salts we added, and one more thing. I always like a little bit of fresh ground pepper at the end. As I said, we've got plenty of heat, but I still love the flavor that this adds, and that's plenty. And there you have it. It's my version of 16 bean soup with a nice tomato broth, depth of flavor added with seasonings, not meat, not animal products. And again, there's no concentrated fat in this. So this is a delicious whole food, plant-based meal. Add a salad, add some bread, enjoy it as it is. What I love about this 16 bean soup is it's really economical. Every ingredient that I used is easily found in any grocery store. We added some potato, we added some carrot. Our indulgence was a little fresh parsley, but you can find all of these ingredients. It cooks for a long time. Total cooking time was about 2 hours. Don't forget we pre-soaked the beans, and we fast soaked them, so we covered them with water, boiled them for about 2 minutes, let them set for about an hour. I'm not great at soaking beans overnight because I never know what I want to eat the next day, so that's always a good tip. Don't salt your broth or your beans while they cook, and they'll get nice and soft, they'll get tender, they'll do everything that beans are supposed to do in a soup. This is a delicious meal. This is the kind of cooking my grandmother did for my entire childhood. It's comfort food, it's hearty, it's really good for you. And as I mentioned, this particular recipe we made whole food, plant-based, and no oil. We did use salt. If you want to admit that, excuse me, if you want to omit that, this is a 3 glass of wine recipe because, you know, we've been sequestered for 9 days now. But if you want to omit salt, lemon is a great substitute, lemon rind. There are some great seasoning blends that you can use in place of salt. The vinegar also helps. The spices certainly help. We're not on a salt-restricted diet, and again, to a very large pot of soup, we used about 2.5 teaspoons total of salt, and a teaspoon of that was celery salt, just for some added depth of flavor. So it's a great soup, and I hope you'll try it. Thanks for watching and being with us, and we're going to keep doing these videos as long as we're held inside so that we don't kill each other.